Buongiorno, siamo qua per la conferenza stampa del nostro film fuori concorso Final Account di Lucas Holland. È un film che abbiamo visto prestissimo, uno dei primissimi che abbiamo invitato, ci è piaciuto subito, è il frutto di un lavoro di 10 anni e eravamo particolarmente ansiosi, e anche lui lo era, di accogliere il regista qua a Venezia. Purtroppo è mancato un paio di mesi fa, ma siamo molto contenti di avere con noi sua moglie Yvonne Hennessy e tutta la famiglia Hennessy Holland, che sono qua seduti davanti, e al mio fianco è uno dei grandi collaboratori di Holland a questo progetto, il suo montatore Sam Hope, e in collegamento Skype, che vedo Skype, Zoom, wrong platform. In collegamento Zoom abbiamo due produttori del film, John Batzek e Rite Oder. I'm going to start with a question to Sam, because you've been working on this film for almost as long as this project has been in the works, 10 years. So it's 10 years, 12 years, 300 interviews. Can you give us a sense of the scope of this documentary?
It is, when we began the project, when Luke began before I did in 2008, it is vast. He had an ambition to interview Germans and Austrians in the primary, but then went further. He wanted to expand his scope to France, to South America, to Spain. He spent his entire life, I would say his entire life has been leading to this point.
And how much do you think it factored in the way this project was shaped and his involvement, the fact that he learned only very late, rather late in life, that he was Jewish. He didn't grow up knowing that. So how did that affect his involvement and his participation and his design of it?
Well, I think that revelation was pivotal in his in forming his view and in terms of informing his curiosity. He wanted to discover who, I think, at the beginning of this project, he set out to find who murdered his grandparents. I think that was a wild idea at first. I don't think he ever intended to actually meet the people who did it. Instead, he wanted to find people who had done similar things to other families, other grandparents. No, it's a lifetime in the making. All of his films leading up to this point have been similarly informed. His film, I Was a Slave Laborer, dealing with German industry and their complicity and the fight for compensation for slave laborers, and Good Morning, Mr. Hitler, where he showed footage from the 1939 Munich Arts Festival to Germans who had been alive at that time, who'd participated. So you can see the groundwork being laid there already.
To John and Rita that entered this project a little later, what do you think it makes it so different in comparison to other films that have been done on the Shoah?
Well, I think it's different to Shoah in the sense that it's about Germans, and I think Shoah was wider. And it's also, this one is very much about witnesses and just bystanders, not survivors. And of course, it's much shorter.
And John, I was asking actually in general, what makes this different than other documentaries that have been done on what do you think the specifics are on Nazism and
I can't speak for all films that have been made on the subject, but I would say, it's pretty remarkable to have just ordinary people who were complicit in the events of those years be interviewed in the way that Luke did interview them. It's not something I've ever seen before, and I think in that respect, that's what makes this such a remarkable film. It is ordinary people talking about their experience of living through those extraordinary years, and that's something I've never seen before.
And I also think that it's very important that it really shows how state control and coercion can normalize the abnormal. And I think those interviews really show that, how people just accept what's really quite abnormal as normal. And I think that's very relevant today as well.
Yeah, that's what struck us when we saw the film is how poignant is to the present time, and because I've never seen anything that shows how easy is to slip, you know, into something that is unthinkable. Sam, can you talk a little bit about this conversation you had with Luke on how to walk the fine line during these interviews, on trying to understand these people but not creating an apology for them?
I think Luke always characterized these interviews, rather than interviews, as conversations. He didn't approach it from an academic point of view wholly. He wanted to ask them questions about their personal lives, and it was a very difficult process, I think, to get them to open up. At first, there was a lot of resistance, a lot of hesitation. Sometimes they didn't want to be interviewed, or they'd say, "I can talk to you, but not on camera." And he would make them the offer. He said, "I'm going to tell you what I tell all my interviewees. We can record this, and at the end, if you're not happy, I'll hand you the tapes, and you can do whatever you want with them. You can destroy them, you can keep them for your own purposes. All I'm interested in is hearing your testimony. And this is your opportunity to inform history. If you feel you've been robbed, if you feel you've been silenced, this is a chance to sort of put yourself on the record."
Se avete delle domande, alzate la mano. There.
One moral and one technical. The moral one is how is important to give voice to the witnesses on the other side of the Holocaust. And did you have a particular editing in this movie, and what kind of choice did you make for this? Thank you.
Can you repeat the question? Yeah, could you just repeat the question for us, for Rita and I?
Oh yes, is asking how it's important to give word to the other side, so to listen to the other side, not just the victims but the perpetrators, and also what were the choices made in the editing of the film.
Well, I think we sort of touched on the first bit before, didn't we? You know, it seems in some respects the most resonant way to tell this story is to allow the ordinary people to talk us through their experience of it, as Rita was saying as well. You know, it's remarkable to hear their account of living through what they lived through, and the sort of the level of their complicity, for want of another word. So you know, and that was a choice that Luke made. Of course, there'd be many brilliant films made which show the other side of the story, and as I said, there'd be many brilliant ones. But I think Luke felt, and I think we all think he's right, that there was great value in telling the story from the perspective of the bystanders. And then from an editing point of view, you know, we went about it as a team, as we would on any other film that we make. We brought in a very brilliant, very talented editor, and set about working through Luke's material in a way as to deliver what was the core of what Luke was trying to achieve, and the core of the message Luke wanted to convey to people. So there's no manipulation in it. It was just the process we always go through. We spent, I forget, Sam and Rita can both say exactly how many months we spent, but a lot of months plowing through the edit, figuring out what's the most powerful and effective and authentic way to tell this story.
Sam, you wanted something especially to the editing part?
To the editing part, I mean, this was an extraordinarily long edit, I think. I mean, in terms of when we began in January, we didn't properly finish until about November. It was about 11 months, and then even additional color editing. It was not necessarily an easy edit to go through, and considering the size, the scope of the archive, the scope of the amount of footage that he recorded, 300 interviews, almost 1,000 hours of journey and of interview. It is difficult to then pass that down. But of course, as it is always with any film or any story. But I think yes, we wanted to focus on those core issues of perpetration, of complicity, and and hopefully that message of understanding of why did this happen.
Something to add to this. I'm also interested in terms of the edit. One thing that I also loved is the choice of interspacing the conversations with these images, sort of placid images of places, and it's a really brilliant device because it gives you, as I was saying before, in the green room, a sense of geography. It kind of times, it gives you time to absorb what you're seeing. And at what stage in post-production that idea came, and how did you get to it?
Well, I think that was established from the very beginning. Luke always he saw the German landscape as imbued with the whole. I mean, it's sort of inescapable from the Holocaust. Or this is. I think his feeling was that the Holocaust sometimes just gets limited to the spaces of the camps, but whereas it is countrywide, every single town has a story. Everyone had a neighbor or a friend or someone who they knew. It stretched across the entire country and into Austria and beyond into the east and indeed into France. It is, and so I think he wanted to communicate that. It is a landscape haunted by memories.
Hello, Lamry Bakary from The Guardian. Anti-Semitism has raised its head in the UK over the last few months. We've had some very high-profile cases where it's the Labour Party having to launch an investigation into anti-Semitism within the political party, or whether it's high-profile people making anti-Semitic statements and being supported in public. Do you think the film can help kind of break this complacency that we have with anti-Semitism? Sometimes there's a temptation to see it as something that's in the rearview mirror of history, but it's obviously a contemporary issue. Do you think the film can help to stop that complacency?
John and Rita, did you get the question?
Rita, do you want to have a go?
I think that we need to learn from history, and I think this film gives the audience that opportunity. And I really think, it's one generation talking to another, and in a very direct way. Just telling their accounts. And I think education would be very useful, I hope. And
it continues it maintains it as a discussion point, which, as you just said in your question, is vital because of what is going on in the world today. And therefore, this film and films like this not force an audience, but present an audience with a history and which has a relevance to today that will hopefully prompt conversation that might conceivably result in a diminishment of this kind of anti-Semitic behavior, etc. And yeah.
And how do you think the age of the people that are interviewed factor in, both in the way they process their memory of what happened then, and in the way that we see the film?
Well, I think Luke's view of memory, I think you might not be able to remember what happened, what you had for breakfast yesterday, but you can record incredibly precise details about your childhood, these strong memories that leap out at you. And they spoke, during these interviews, they spoke, all of these conversations, these interviewees spoke with a remarkable clarity. Their recall was incredible.
And I think also Luke gave them sufficient time to recall their memories, which is really important. He doesn't do a news interview. It was very much, a documentary interview, which it took quite some time. We spent a lot of time with the individuals.
Yeah, there is almost like a sense of relief sometimes for, when they get to say, it's really, really fascinating. Alessandra.
Buongiorno, mi ha molto colpito l'intervistato che sostiene anche in maniera molto perentoria: chi dice di non sapere mente. Ecco, mi chiedo se questa convinzione è ormai diffusa o ancora ci si trincera dietro era impossibile sapere cosa stava accadendo, anche perché tutti parlano più che altro di questo odore così forte, che era un indizio talmente forte che non poteva essere trascurato.
John and Rita, did you get the translation or?
No.
No, okay. She was very. She found it very striking. The person the people that in the film that say who pretends that they didn't know is lying, you know? And so her question is it that still a valid excuse or an argument rather, or not today? And especially given the fact that so many of them mention the smell, this very strong odor that was sort of haunting the places where they were.
I think a common refrain from that period, just in the post-war period, was always Nach dem Krieg. It was always after the war that we learned of these horrible crimes. In the process of these interviews, I think that as a possibility becomes vanishingly small. Even if you weren't necessarily there or you weren't participating, you weren't necessarily active, you knew someone, or you'd spoken to someone, you'd heard a rumor, or a neighbor was involved, or your brother who has a soldier for a son came home and told you the story, or had photographs. I think it's possible, but very unlikely that no one could have known.
John and Rita, do you have something to add?
No, I agree with Sam. I think it's very unlikely that these people didn't know. But, you know, at the time, obviously, they repressed it and went along with, you know, as I said before, state control and coercion. You know, there's a guy who said, you know, if 99 people in front of me thought it was okay to slaughter Jews, you know, if they thought it was okay, I would go with it too. So how you get, you know, how the abnormal becomes very normal in such circumstances.
E visto la mole di lavoro, mi chiedevo se il film finisce qui o se avete pensato a uno sviluppo successivo di tutto questo materiale, e visto che questo film è appunto memoria e anche storia, se c'è già l'idea di utilizzarlo a livello appunto di museo, di archivio, che seguito avrà?
Considering the scope of the you know, of the film and just the sheer quantity of the materials, is there anything else in the works in terms of enlarging this project? The film is the end of it, and are you also entertaining conversation with the museums or institutions as such to deposit the you know, the archive?
Well, from the very beginning of this project, Luc had envisioned it as an archive first and a film second. To that end, he made contacts with numerous institutions, including the Wiener Library at the very beginning, the Institut National de l'Audiovisuel, who've been staunch supporters of ours from the very beginning, and University College London. We've since also expanded this group to USC Shoah and the US Holocaust Memorial Museum, with the explicit intention of utilizing this material both in the classroom, in educational environments, and for further research. I think, and also in terms of more films or more use of the material, I know it was Luc's ambition for this not to be the last of it. I think we will hopefully make a few more things.
So let me just add, the film's financier, Participant Media, are planning, I mean, with the film itself, are planning significant social media campaigns that will support the film in all the territories that it's released. So yes, the impact of Luc's amazing work is going to be felt far beyond the realms of just the film.
And I'm also curious, going back into the making of it, about the kind of detective work that Luc had to do to find these people and to convince them to have these conversations.
I think that's the most incredible thing about this film, is that Luc spent all those years just by chance encounters. He went to Germany, he met people on beaches, in saunas, in hotels, in old people's homes, and through friends. And it was very extensive, and partly his personality of how he could, you know, talk to people and open them up. But it was extraordinary how he managed to do that.
Oh, indeed. I mean, Luc he is fascinated by humanity. I mean, he would begin a conversation with you, and within 5 minutes you'd be charmed. Because he was genuinely curious. He wanted to know about he wanted to know your story. He wanted to know more about you. I think that was true for all these interviewees, particularly in some of the more bizarre circumstances when he met them. In particular, I think Heinrich Schultz, the man in the cap who takes him on the tour around the farm, he saw him just walking along the side of the road and tapped his taxi driver on the back and said, "Stop, pull over." Leapt out of the car and started talking with him. And within about half an hour, Heinrich had said, "Come back to my house. We'll have tea and we'll talk some more."
It's interesting also in the film the relationship between that generation and the new generation of neo-Nazi and much younger white supremacists. Yes, that one scene that is very is very strong. Was there more? Can you talk a little bit about it?
So the Wannsee House scene was a bit of an oddity. It wasn't necessarily planned. He'd received a call from Hans Werk just a day after the interview that they'd conducted before, and he said, "I'm giving a talk tomorrow at the Wannsee House to a bunch of students. Would you like to come along?" Luke, not wanting to miss an opportunity, of course, leapt at the chance. It was unplanned, unrehearsed, and I don't necessarily know what Luke was expecting when he walked in that day. But I think, yes, it speaks to this contemporary issue. I mean, that was in 2011. At the time we were filming, this film felt incredibly relevant. It's only gotten more so. These are the same issues that we're still dealing with today. I mean, the news in Germany, just from 3 days ago, I think. Anti-Semitism, hate have not gone away. These powerful, vicious ideologies are still present. In fact, they're gaining strength, not just in Germany and Austria, but around the world.
Yeah. And to this, John, can you perhaps talk a little bit more about the plan? You said a big social media campaign, but as Sam said, this is not a German issue. I live in the United States, and it's very scary out there right now. So can you talk a little bit how you are planning to, and participants are planning to bring visibility to the film beyond Europe?
I mean, up to a point I can, it's relatively early stages, but as Sam has already said, it was participant who showed the film to the Shoah Foundation and the Holocaust Museum and is in talks with Yad Vashem. And, part of participants' remit is social campaigns and social impact campaigns. And so we're at the very beginning of them wrapping their heads around how they're going to go about that with this film, as we are, in fact, at the beginning of the process of figuring out who our partners are globally to release the film. But there's no question that all of those releases will be supported by social impact campaigns that are in themselves supported by participants. So all I can say is that it is absolutely the intention to prompt the debate that we're having right now off the back of the release of this film with the support of participants and the kind of organizations that they are reaching out to, and we will continue to reach out to.
Yeah, well, that is why we're even more prouder to have this movie in Venice and to present it to the world for the first time. I want to thank our guest for being here, and the Holland family for having joined us for what would be a great screening. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, John. Speak soon. See how the screening goes.